Head of the Nurburgring or WEC Championship at the Nurburgring GP circuit. Here the cars will face several challenges. They navigate through a lot of tight twisting corners as well as the high speed corners, the Schumacher S's, and the long straights that could lead to good overtaking opportunities. I'm joined by Tom in the pit lane, who will be able to cast some light as to the team's strategies and hopefully give us good coverage of the race. Tom?
Yes, I'll be doing that all race, looking at the sector times and looking into every single piece of data to provide you with the best knowledge of what's happening on the track.
Indeed. So we joined the cars in qualifying, following Memto89 in his Bentley Speed 8, just passing one of the R18s we see there. Memto is a car who likes to set his time early so he can then see what everyone else can do, so he's got plenty of time to react to the case. Oh, car looks a bit twitchy there, but that's possibly lag. So as we follow him coming into the final turn, about to start his first flying lap, hopefully he'll get through nice and cleanly. And yes, the car's very twitchy. I imagine that's mostly network issues, but yeah, we'll find out. Have you heard anything coming into this round about who's got the pace, Tom?
I've seen I was at practice with the drivers, and Memto89 looked very strong, setting 140s all round, but it's up for grabs. It really is. We'll see faster than a 140, I bet.
Yeah, that's quick times around here, isn't it? I seem to remember, I suppose the fastest machines I've seen around here in a while are the Blancpain cars, which are into the sort of 2 minutes quite often.
Yes, the GT cars are around that pace, I believe, but not too sure on that.
Yes, because it's important to remember that the GTE specs in WEC are quite a lot higher than they are in real life. They sort of push about 600 horsepower, whereas in real life, many of them actually don't make it to 500.
Yes, that is a factor to consider, and there's quite a few differences between GT6 and real life, which we can see in lap times.
Yes, and especially the sort of interplay between the amount of tyre grip they get and the amount of aero grip they get, and how that relates to real life. I think GT6 certainly there's a lot more mechanical grip.
Yes, there's a lot.
In sort of the high-speed corners, the cars often understeer more than they'd like to. So Memto crosses the line with a 140.947, followed quickly by Nick, and Ninchin goes straight to pole, which is a position he's fairly confident or comfortable with from this season. Still, it's all close. It's still, I say that, he's actually gone a second faster. I misread Memto's time. So, interesting to see how Nick does tonight. Certainly the last race at Spa, he was incredibly fast in a car that many teams have struggled to tame this season. But he unfortunately disconnected, didn't he?
Yes, she's a very fast driver. She's new on the scene and certainly starting on the right foot.
Yes, indeed. Where else have we got? We've got Ed Schumacher, who's, in fact, if you look at the entire LMP field, other than Nin, they're all pushing times within 0.3 of each other. And obviously in the GT fields, that's as close as ever is 2,000ths or 200ths even separating Nicodemus and RCB.
Wow, this is lining up to be a very close race. I can guarantee that.
Yes, and tyre wear is obviously a huge factor with so many sort of long but slow corners.
Yes, I find the camber on some of these corners and the forces the cars have to withstand do wear out the tyres quite quickly if you're not paying attention.
Yes, and obviously there's, with sort of combination of very low-speed corners that tend to induce understeer, and then corners with enormous curbs on them, like Schumacher S's, which sort of can lead to the cars getting flicked off them, really. It's definitely going to be a challenge towards the end of the stint.
Today I was fortunate enough to climb on board an Audi R18 and take a few laps around here, and I noticed immediately how much the cars can have to rely on the grip from the track, not clipping the curbs and stuff like that, because the cars are so low that it just unsettles the car, and you look at it if you make it around the corner, just scoops them up and flips them off.
Yes, or a number of teams, or certainly that BMW seems to be running quite a lot of ride height, which is often the remedy for that, but obviously as you increase the ride height you sacrifice the amount of body control that the car has. We ride on board with, or we're following RCB as he's heading down into sector 2 now, as he's going through that lovely left-right, and yeah, it's a beautiful set of corners this, really, because you get a lot of speed coming through that left-hander, and then you have to suck all off into the right and then gain it again down that straight into the hairpin. And you can gain huge amounts of time on the car you're chasing there. Coming up through the Schumacher S's now, another usually flat-out sweeper. I've not actually driven the GTE cars around here, but certainly in LMPs it's flat out. And then over the top of the hill, just about to start descending onto the back straight. He has got Nico quite close behind him, so we'll see if Nico can benefit from the draft as far as lap times go. But yes, a 150 is definitely a pretty solid time around here, so we'll see if he can improve on that.
Yes, certainly is in the mix with the rest of.
I think we're having a few technical issues there. But yes, RCB has actually returned to the pits, so he appears to have decided that he's done as much as he can on that set of tyres. So I imagine he'll be back in fairly soon, and we'll see, or sorry, back out even fairly soon, and we'll see if he can do better on lower fuel. Certainly pole isn't exactly something to complain about, so he may just be biding his time, sort of calming himself down before the race begins. So that's often an important factor in getting a good start, especially if you're on pole. So as we look back on the timing screen, Nin has indeed improved, now down to a 139, but then again so has much of the rest of the field. They're still about that second back. And yes, if you look at that, second and third in LMP split by 19 thousandths of a second, so a lot of close racing there, and Schumacher just 2/10 behind that. But yes, once again, Nin seems to be the class of the field with seemingly no rivals, but we'll see if anyone can beat him on a lower fuel run. RCB is, oh, in fact GTE is incredibly close, with Nico following RCB by less than 500ths of a second. Then there's a big gap behind them of sort of 2 seconds or so to Matthias, Duke Adam and David B. But obviously it is all about race pace, and I don't know if many of you are following the car selection series, but certainly Nico had an interesting time, shall we say, of that. So we'll see if he can hold on to RCB, since he did have the pace then as well, or whether he'll push it too far and have an accident.
Yes, Nico Damas did have a good race in CCS last week, I believe. He did have a minor issue, which involved a crash, but his recovery was impressive, to say the least. I think he walked away with a third position from that race after going down the order book.
At one point he was I think well over a lap down on sort of the entire, or not the entire field, but certainly the front runners, and yes, he just simply got in the toe of one of the leading cars and just drove back through the field. It was impressive to see.
We saw a lot of close racing last weekend, and certainly the WEC series does have a very, very good reputation for close racing, as we've witnessed last month with Spa, I believe.
Yes, Spa was definitely an impressive circuit to watch at, wasn't it? And especially with such sort of high downforce single line corners, the amount of racing we got, the sort of close racing of that was impressive to see.
I believe on the final lap there was nothing between them.
Yes, because there was a late disconnect from Memto, wasn't there, who'd been leading for much of the race, and then suddenly he was out, and the battle for third, or what was the battle for second and third, really heated up to being the battle for the lead. As we ride with Memto now, he's just coming down to the hairpin, and he's currently lying in third. He's, as we discussed, just hundredths of a second behind Nick, so we'll see what he can do to catch her up. It will be interesting to see if he and Nick get caught up in a battle early on that will allow Ninchin to do his favourite thing and just disappear off into the distance in a very Vettel-esque victory. There's been many of his races.
Yes, Ninchin is most famous for putting a lot of preparation into each and every single race, and it paid off in most cases. You just have to say the rest of those.
Yes, indeed. He, I don't actually know, but I have a feeling this is one of, I think, about 3 series he actually competes in, and so yeah, he's got a lot of preparation time, and certainly it definitely shows, because I don't think I've seen him at a single track where his car wasn't completely nailed to the road, where it looked sort of that little bit twitchy or that little bit understeery. So he definitely has a good handle on it.
Last year, I don't believe he did N24, so while everyone else in the field was competing in the N24, he went out in the cars. He learned a lot about the cars before anyone else did, and that gave him the advantage. So
yes. Oh, it's been a difficult journey with Gran Turismo 6, just because there have been a number of various updates that have affected the driving and handling physics there, and certainly it seems that the Peugeot has remained a fairly solid base from which to add your setup to, compared to some of the cars like the Audis, and certainly the Pescarolo suffered very much from being far too twitchy and then just far too understeery. And sorry, go on.
Yeah, the Peugeot really is the in between, the medium of all the cars. I mean, it's good in the corners, good on the straights, and we've got some cars that are less good, and less good in the corners, and more proficient in the straights.
Yes,
that makes sense.
Indeed. And speaking of, we follow one of the Bentleys. This is Ayrton Schumacher's car, and he certainly has commented on the fact that it has a lot of cornering grip. A surprise of that is obviously that at the Le Mans race, Memto managed to take a commanding victory in the same car, which is sort of surprising given its cornering prowess and not necessarily its straight line speed. But obviously he managed to trade off the sort of amount of low downforce and then rely on the car's inherent cornering ability and then gain the speed that way.
I believe, and purely aesthetically, it's the most superior here. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful car to look at, and a beautiful car.
It's definitely one of my favourite LMPs. I think, I guess it's technically a GT1 car, but the Toyota TS020 I think is the only car I've ever seen that bests the Bentley Speed 8, and obviously we may be biased as the most recent British Le Mans winner, but
yeah.
No, especially since it's mostly an Audi R8, but certainly it's a very handsome car, and especially that livery, just
British racing grounds are lovely.
Yes.
I also think the R18 isn't bad looking, to be fair. I saw this in real life at the 6 Hours of Silverstone, and coming out of the pit garage on a Friday morning. It's just I'll never forget that. Just beautiful, beautiful.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, I will admit the R18 has grown on me over time, and this year's cars, the narrower track width.
Yeah.
Or in photos, I never really sort of got behind it, but yes, I had a similar experience of watching them at Silverstone. And there's that sort of massive contradiction between when you see it in the garage and it's this tiny thing. Or for those who haven't seen it, a lot of the camera angles are very low down, and you often miss just how small modern prototypes are. Yes, and so you've got this tiny car, and yet you watch it go through corners at just mind-boggling speeds.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly the closest thing to F1 in terms of performance and lap times. I mean, the next tier up is F1. So.
Yes. Well, we've had a change of order in at LMP. Memto has managed to do it. He's beat Nick, so we'll see if she has a response. Ed Schumacher and Glenn Alls still remaining in 4th and 5th, with Ninchin leading the class, as is fairly expected. Nico Dermus and RCB are still trading lap times in GTE, with Matthias 007 in 8th, Duke Adam in 9th, and David B in 10th. David P, interestingly enough, seems to have called it a day, and is just preparing himself for the race. We've often seen good race pace from the Australian. His ability to sort of just keep out of accidents and keep his head steady often means that while he doesn't have the overall pace, he's often right up there towards the end.
I'm not going to say he plays it safe, but he's consistent.
Yes.
Like a lot of the drivers. Yeah. It's interesting, the battle between Memto and Nick, because it's like 44th second. Forgive me for my lack of unit knowledge, but it's close.
Yes. As we ride with Duke Adam in the I don't know, I quite like the look of the RX-7. It's a very super GT in the wide wheel arches, and
the flared body kit as well.
Yes, it's hard to describe that sort of chopped off ends of it. The most recent incarnation of it I can think of in GT racing is the Z4 GTE that races in the what was the American Le Mans series, is now the Tudor United Sports Car Championship. Always Duke goes off in quite a big way, going right across the track at the S's. But yes, he seems to have managed to get himself restrained in the gravel trap and headed off, but obviously he'll have to ride off that lap. And yes, with only 1 minute and 20 left, I think that's qualifying over for him, so he's made a solid 9th since David B is in the pit. Ninchin has just gone out and set an even faster lap time. In fact, so has Nick, who has now re-beaten Memto and has closed the gap finally from the 1 second barrier down to Ninchin. Is now a mere 6/10 behind. Ed Schumacher has also closed up quite heavily on Memto, and is now only, in fact, look at that, he's just 300ths behind. And then about 3/10 behind them is Glenn Alls again, the other Bentley.
Yeah. This is going to be close. I honestly can't call this. The track is so unforgiving. I mean, it's the Nurburgring's little brother, I think. That's an appropriate name for it.
Yes, it's often easy to forget about the Grand Prix circuit when there's the terrifying spectacle of the Nordschleife behind it.
Yeah.
Or a course where sort of being a metre out of position makes a huge difference to each corner, and memorising them and getting that line perfect every time is, well, very challenging. But the GP circuit is surprisingly difficult to do consistently. So as we run down the final order, it's Ninchin on pole with Nick in second, Memto following in third, and Ed and Schumacher in fourth, with Glenn Owls rounding out the LMP field in fifth. Then we have Nico Dermis starting the GTE field, with RCB in second.
Can everyone make a mental note of your
Texas
starting position? Who's in front of you and who's behind you?
Or was it Matthias? I apologise.
Yes.
In eighth, and Duke Adam in ninth, and David B in 10th.
So that we can restart with Mini Piggy.
I took a picture of the result.
So in just a few moments, we'll be about to start the parade lap, which we'll see. Oh, we've got a full start check on, which is always reassuring. I remember at the start of last week's CSS round, we had an interesting moment where a few of the drivers, shall we say...
Mini.
Oh.
Ah, yes, we're being informed. I'll just check the situation.
The entrance of the pit.
Oh, yeah, alright. At the beginning.
Yeah.
With a mini
so
sticky.
when everyone else comes around,
you start the race with mini sticky, yes.
You go when the last person's past the pit.
So I don't do the one.
Mini Sticky joining us in another of the 908s.
Alright.
He'll be starting from the back of the LMP field because obviously he missed qualifying.
Coolio. So sit at the exit of pit lane.
Would you think he would start from the back of the grid totally?
The finish line or the pit
you
lane?
reckon?
I believe that in WEC we run it with the LMPs starting as a group and the GTEs starting as a group, because one of the rules is that the pole sitter has to start on the left-hand side of the track. But in the GTE field, if that's not the order that the LMPs run, what they can opt to do is the GTE leader can decide to start on the left-hand side of the track as a separate grid from the LMP field. Obviously here it might be more advantageous to start on the right due to the first turn being a right-hander, but hopefully with the long run it will allow the grid to get through nice and cleanly and to have spaced themselves out slightly.
I believe what is happening is that we're going in straight into a race now, and then what they'll do on the parade lap is they'll line up the formation according to the results from previous, and then just slowly stick it in there.
Memto,
Yes, that makes sense.
Nico, RCB,
And that way, when they cross, they've got laps to sort themselves out.
Duke Adam, and David B.
Indeed. And yes, that should be plenty of time. So, yes, we're watching RCB at the moment, who is just pulling off to the side to allow the LMP cars through. Basically, yeah, one of the biggest fears, I think, of everyone on the parade lap is coming into conflict or contact with another car, which, especially when you have to rearrange the grid, is always a risk. As we watch Nick in her Audi R18 in second place, and yes, it's certainly, despite being the most recent car, it certainly isn't the easiest to tame, and she's done a fantastic job with the setup of that car.
She's fantastic at tuning cars. I mean, I once raced her in a thousand horsepower Ferrari FXX, and I thought my setup was perfect, but definitely away with suspension. Because right, as we're coming up to the parade lap on round 10 of the Core WEC Championship at the Nurburgring.
Indeed, we watch the cars go through the hairpin at the bottom of the track. There's quite a lot of elevation change on this circuit. Obviously, being right next to the Nordschleife in the Eifel Mountains, it's to be expected, but it's certainly, you notice the cars sort of having an advantage on brakes going up the hill and then sort of down the hill. You think, or it seems so much harder to make the move stick just because the braking distance is so much longer. Yes, as we watch Nick still going around with Memto just to her left. It's odd because this often happens on parade laps, is that the second car is slightly staggered and then the third car is really eager to get right on the tail of the first.
And then you get sort of closed up, so it's all about getting as close as you can when you go across that line, because that's when lights go out.
Well, it's a combination of that and trying to time it so that you're on full throttle as the leader goes and sets off the green flag. Yes, so we're coming through the final chicane now with only one more turn to go. It's about to get underway for round 10 of the core WEC. The LMP field leading us through, the GCE field just behind. We ride with Nick, and hopefully this will be a nice clean start with all the leaders getting through.
Should be interesting to watch.
Indeed. And we're green, I believe.
We're off. Yes, we're off.
Green.
And Ninchin makes a breakthrough.
Mento's made a good break. He's managed to get up to second already, but Nick still has the inside line. We'll see if Mento can hold it around the outside. And
side by side.
It seems that Mento's done it. He's got the inside for the next corner as Glenn has been passed as well into... Oh no, Glenn has made it past Ed and Schumacher into fourth, which is always good. Further behind the GCE field, RCB has made it onto the lead with Nico Dermis just behind. Duke Adam has had a fantastic start. And you were right. Sorry, yes, Duke Adam has made up one spot past Matthias. And you were right that Mini Stiggy has indeed started from the back of the grid. So we'll see how long it takes him to get through the GCE field. And yes, Nick is still fighting with Memto and has the inside line through the Schumacher S's. It is possible to go too wide through here, but obviously the amount of time lost makes it very difficult. And ooh, she's run through the gravel, and it's very difficult to tell if Memto ran into her then. Just because the amount of speed change that you suddenly get, and obviously with the dynamics of the car, it's impossible to then hit the brakes if the car in front is slowed down. But you don't want to risk going through the corner slower than you can.
You want to go through as fast as possible and as clean as possible.
Indeed, but obviously traffic affects that, and this is made even more obvious by the fact that Ninchin is already almost out of camera shot. As yet we ride on board with Memto, chasing Nick down the finish straight. He's going to make a dive to the inside now, I imagine, and yes, there he goes, and he's hard on the brakes, and he hasn't pulled it off. Nick has managed to make it around the outside. We'll have the inside line for the next corner. It's impressive to see the balance of the cars here. There's very little between them as they accelerate off the corners, and obviously there's the concertina effect slightly, but there's definitely very little between them. And certainly Mento is going to struggle to find a way past unless Nick makes a mistake, although Mento himself getting very squirrely there on the inside curbing. And Glenn Alls seems to have lost out to Ed Schumacher again.
Schumacher is in fourth.
Yes, we've got the two Bentleys running together again. So yes, we got the we switch now to Glenn Alls, watching the lovely Pescarolo driving just behind Ed Schumacher, I believe. Ed has definitely proved himself to be one of the faster drivers, and it does actually look like he's made quite the gap now, and is chasing down Memto and Nick. Glenn has definitely proved himself to be a reliable driver. I believe he's actually driving as a reserve for tonight's race.
I'll have to check up on that, but...
Yeah, certainly from what I've heard, the Pescarolo isn't the easiest car to tame as we switch to the GCE field. With Nico Dermis very close to RCB, I imagine he'll be able to make the move with little time, or very soon, probably into turn 1. As yes, he's got a good drive off the final corner. Sorry, pardon, Tom?
Half a second, I think, between them.
Yes,
they're about half a second between them, I think.
I see. Yes, he's not quite made the move sticking to turn 1, but he's definitely right on the tail. Of course, the difference between the LMP and the GTE cars is that because of the lack of, or lower downforce of the GTE cars, they're much more able to race very closely together than the LMP cars are, because obviously if you're not getting the grip from the aerodynamics, you're then having to use the grip of the tyres, which often wears them out a lot faster if you're following a car closely than LMP.
It's better to let the aerodynamics of the car do its job. With, I believe, the LMP being so close to each other, it was demonstrated with a lack of the interference was demonstrated when we saw in 1999 Mark Webber flip in the race 24 hours, flip upside down due to him. He clipped the corner on Mulsanne, I think, on Indianapolis, and didn't have enough aero because he was in the draft of someone else and just flipped. So,
I didn't know that, or I believe Mark Webber's crash actually happened on the way down to the Mulsanne corner. I forget who the other driver was, but yes,
there was one.
Mercedes CLR was a project to forget for Mercedes-Benz. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, the CLK GTR, the car that went before that, was enormously successful in the FIA GT Championship. I believe it won and beat the Porsches that beat it. Oh, and Nick's just had a big off coming through the tight chicane at the end of Sector 1, which has let the entire LMP field through. I would imagine he'd have got damage from that. Do you have any news on that, Tom?
I'll just have a look right now. I have no reports of damage, but I honestly don't know.
It's difficult to tell, but yes, as we look at the timing screen now, and we see that the LMP fields actually space themselves out impressively evenly, with Memto 4 seconds behind Nin and Ayrton 4 seconds behind him. In fact, even better than that, Glenel's also 4 seconds behind Ayrton, so very well spaced. As it's difficult to see if Ayrton Schumacher is actually gaining at the moment. I would imagine not, as Memto's just set a lap a second quicker than his teammate in the Bentley.
I do believe he is getting a bit faster as the gap has gone down from 4 seconds to 3 seconds, but we'll definitely see.
There have been a slight mistake from Memto as he had to dodge around Nick, but we'll find out. And yes, as we look down at the GTE field, we see that RCB and Nico is still, in fact, as we say that, we see Nico pass RCB. So yes, they are very much neck and neck. As we watch them now, they're coming almost side by side down the front straight. Nico going defensive very early, but RCB determined to get on the inside. No, he's had to switch to the outside. They come into turn 1. RCB very late on the brakes. Will he make the apex? He has. Nico simply having no answer to the BMW straight line speed, which is an interesting fact, because you'd have thought on a track like this it would be the higher downforce and better cornering speed cars that would have the edge compared to a car like the BMW, which is known to have very high straight line speed. But I suppose it comes down to the fact that all the slow corners mean that it's the power and the traction off the corners that make the difference.
Yeah. There's a lot of slow corners and that lead onto fast straights, and that's where the BMW definitely benefits, because they'll be reaching about 150 miles an hour. The GTE cars will. Side by side.
Yep, side by side again as they go into the Schumacher S's. And RTB once again getting the best of Nico, who's run out on the gravel, so has lost a bit of time, but undoubtedly will be right back up there in a few seconds. And yes, we see both cars really going to the track limits there, neither wanting to cede a single moment, and RCB has run onto the gravel onto the back straight, which will surely let Nico catch right up again. But yes, there's often been discussion of the draft effect in Gran Turismo and the comparative or disparate nature of that compared to the one in real life. And this was distinctly improved, I forget how long ago, about sort of 4 or 5 months, with the addition of the real mode. But certainly, if you get within that 1 second gap, you'll find that the car behind has a distinct advantage on the straights.
It's allowing them to pull out the side and get up alongside you into the corners. It's something, the progression of slipstreaming in Gran Turismo is something we've seen a lot within the NASCAR community as the racing's improved over there.
Yes, I will admit I've not actually done any NASCAR racing in Gran Turismo since, well, in fact since GT5, but certainly in that it was simply just be somewhere near the front towards the end and just basically try and avoid having an accident, and then seemingly the car that was furthest back by the time you got onto the final straight win. Just because of the sort of combination of drafts. But I imagine that with the change of the settings, it's actually become a lot closer and there's a lot more sort of realistic tactics involved now. As we watch Nick, who doesn't seem to have pitted and is still fairly close to the rest of the LMP cars, it's sometimes an early stop is quite beneficial in that it allows you to get out of sync, and often you'll find that that actually means that you can push harder. As we watch Mento having a little mistake, fortunately not running off the track, but he's now definitely in the clutches of Ed and Schumacher. It's
But 2 seconds is the gap now, and it's getting closer and closer.
I was about to say, I imagine as they go on, yes, under the timeline they got a lot closer, but yes, it's very difficult when you're racing a car of the same spec, because it's fairly safe to say most racing drivers are fairly proud. And while when you're racing against other cars, you can always say, they had the better car for the day, there was nothing I could have done. If you're racing against a car that's the exact same spec and could have had the exact same setup on opportunities, then it does make you question why you can't go that far, and often it's a cause of then making you want to push too hard to try and catch up.
It's also very tiring mentally to see that your same car is just sticking behind you in your rear view mirror, and that's quite daunting.
Yes, it's not having talked about the washout effect when you're following another car. It's very disheartening to know that you're the leading car and you should be able to drive away from them through this complex of corners, and then to just follow you. As we watch RCB passing a car that's just crashed off. I'm unsure who that is now. He's just gone through the Schumacher S's. It's Nico, I believe. I'm not sure actually. Certainly the gap has gone up very quickly from what it was.
I don't see anything on my end. However, 6 seconds gap is definitely being racing.
It looked as if Nico had gone off driver's left at the Schumacher S's, so it's very easy to get caught up in that gravel, not to have an accident that will cause damage, but certainly a time-consuming off. As we watch Matthias, who's driving the McLaren F1, and switching back to Duke Adam, who is probably about 3 seconds behind, I'd imagine. So
yeah, 5.
5. So yes, he's seems to be holding off David B. as we watch, I believe it's Nimjin starting to come through and lap the GTE field now.
It's
Yes, it is Nimjin. So yeah, here he goes, and yes, Duke leaving him plenty of room, which is, it's always nice when you come across a GTE car that's not in a fight, because you can be, it's fairly reasonable to assume that they're going to leave you sort of a nice amount of room on the entrance to a corner. The difficulty is obviously when you find two GTE cars who are nose to tail, because both of them are going to want to capitalise on the fact that you have to get past at some point.
And the LMPs are just so much faster than GTE cars that when they do pass it, we've got the drivers have to remember that the GTE cars have a race to win, and the the LMP cars have a race to win also. So it's also a compromise.
Yes, it's definitely a trade-off between the two, isn't it? Because there's always ways of letting them pass that don't hurt your lap time and don't hurt their lap time, and then others that you can sort of gain a couple of tenths. Ento running very wide, we see there. But yeah, so others where you can gain a sort of maybe a tenth, but you'll have slowed the GTE car down by sort of 2 seconds or something. There is definitely a sense of compassion that the LMP field and the GTE cars have to have for each other.
So it's about understanding each other, because this is really one big family of racers.
Oh yes, the community is very important, isn't it? Because obviously at the end of the day these guys are all friends, and so while there is occasional rivalries between sort of performance, it is definitely that we don't actually want to go actively out of our way to just be selfish.
It's very friendly. It's a very friendly environment, core, and it's certainly one of the great things about core.
Indeed, as we watch RCV now leading the GT field in solitude compared to earlier where he was very closely followed by Nico. And skipping back to Matthias in third, the race has spread out quite a lot now, which, as you alluded to earlier, Tom, while it's not as intense to watch, it does mean that the racers can now get on with what they're doing, and they will turn their fastest lap times now because their cars aren't hindered by aerodynamics and sort of having to jostle and take slightly compromised lines.
It's getting into a routine that most drivers do, and you'll certainly see it. But I think we're about 20 minutes in.
Yes, I believe we're coming up to. In fact, yes, 20 minutes mark now, as we watch Ed and Schumacher coming into the pits. So, yes, seems fairly obvious he's going to be on a 5-stop strategy from this. Personally, I've always found that this is the quickest way to go with a lot of the LMP cars, and that the soft tyres, while they still have life in them and they're perfectly drivable, the lap time that you lose from not pitting in costs you a lot, as we watch Nick now very close on the tail of Glenn after her earlier accident, and I imagine she'll get past fairly soon. Ooh, as we watch Glenn get very heavily bulked by Adam there, and hopefully we'll see that the yes, Adam's now let them both through, so Nick hasn't lost any time, but Glenn has certainly been held up quite a lot, and we'll see just how long it takes her to go and get past the Pescarolo. As I was saying earlier though, Glenn has jumped into this car as a reserve. So, as we watch Nick getting very late on the brakes, losing out heavily, she's now back behind Adam as well. And through the high-speed Schumacher S's, there's not really a way to get round the GTE car. So yes, that will have compromised her heavily. She now goes strangely to the outside of this corner, but yeah, she's made it past already on the brakes. Yes, as I was saying, reserve drivers are sort of the untold heroes of the WEC in that they tend to jump into the car with almost no preparation, and often they get given setups, but even so, the difference in chassis is enormous as far as the sort of feel goes, and especially cars like the R18, you have to be very, very precise on both the corner entry and corner exit.
Yes.
To sort of get the pendulum at just the right angle and just the right level of slip to be quick in it. Whereas sort of cars like the Peugeot, as we've discussed, are a lot more stable. You can afford to be a lot more sort of point and squirt.
Yeah. While we're talking about Glenhouse, I believe, has Schumacher had an incident? He's dropped down to 5th.
He pitted.
Alright, yeah.
So he pitted at I believe it was lap 12.
Yeah, something like that. While we're talking about Glenhouse, last week I believe he was racing in a Lotus 1100R. No, yeah. Last week in the CCS, and it's certainly a steep learning curve.
Oh, there's an enormous difference between the two types of cars. I believe Glenn is usually, or as we watch Memto coincidentally, I believe he's Memto's teammate in the Speed 8s who'll be racing tomorrow. But yes, Glenn, the difference between driving cars like the LMPs and WEC and the CSS cars is the CSS cars, they're almost so easy to drive, they're actually difficult to drive because you have to go 100% all the time to get the lap time, whereas LMPs, because of the sort of extra difficulty, you can afford to drive at sort of 90% with the knowledge that everyone else is having to hold off that little bit too, to avoid having... Sorry, go on.
One thing that I've noticed in CCS is the cars are a lot slower, so if you make a mistake, that's your lap gone. If you make one little mistake, it punishes you in a big way. The LMP cars accelerate quicker and they can get back on pace almost immediately.
Yes, as they discuss at, or frequently at Monza, where they during the F1 season, where they talk about it being almost like oval racing, in that it's all about momentum. That's exactly what the CSS cars are like. So it's all about preserving that straight line, or rather than sacrificing speed sort of selfishly to gain a bit of lap time in a corner, it's all about preserving that speed because the car can't accelerate as well as it, or as certainly as well as the LMPs can. So it's all about just preserving that speed and not bleeding off with the brakes.
They're not milk floats by any standard, so...
Yes, certainly the amount of sideways grip is enormous, or compared to the straight line speed it feels enormous, so they're very sort of go-karty almost. As we watch, I believe that's actually...
RC.
No, I think it's Nick, who is chasing down Glenelg again, so he's managed to make it, or she even has managed to make it back through the GTE field and is almost right on his tail again.
Yes. RCB has just gone into the pit, so I think this will be, as you said, a 4-5 stop race.
Yes, he's sort of, I suppose he's on to a 4, isn't he? I think, or quite a lot of people in the GTE field try and stretch it to half an hour stint to a 3-stop race, which it can work. Obviously the compromise is that the more stops you do, the more times you're sacrificing that 40 seconds or whatever it is that you take through the pits. But if you're losing sort of a second a lap for 20 laps, then that's already 20 seconds gone. And the more stops you do in a strategy as well, the more sort of leeway you have for making mistakes, in that if you do have to come into the pits for damage, there are more opportunities to do so without it deeply compromising your strategy.
That's one thing that we did notice, that once you make an unscheduled pit stop, what would happen would all your pit stops would go out of sync, so your plan that you made the night before would go out the window, and you'd have to do it in your head, like do the maths in your head, or you could do what I do and just pit when you run out of fuel. That's not the good way. That's not the way you do it.
As we watched Glenn and Nick coming into the pits, one after the other, in fact, and yes, now Hayden Schumacher's strategy pays dividends because he sweeps past both of them. And we just spot Mini Stiggy in the background, I believe, who is, I think he had to start a lap down actually, because he took a long time to get past the GTE field as far as the race position went. So it'll be very difficult for him to recover from that. One of the things that has been sort of a defining thing throughout the WEC is that the quality of drivers means that if you do make a mistake, which often, as we said, causes a pit stop, which is effectively 40 seconds lost minimum, it means it's really, really difficult to catch up with other cars just because the quality of drivers is so high. The odds are they won't actually make a mistake, so you do have to actually gain that time hand over fist. As Ninchin is also coming into the pit lane, I believe.
While everyone's taking their pits, shall we learn a little more about the track?
That seems like a good idea, yes.
Well, the Nurburgring GP, as you've pointed out, is bang next to the Nurburgring, the Nordschleife. And it was, the GP circuit was opened in 1984, was an exhibition race, including some of the world's greatest F1 drivers, including Sir Sterling Moss, Jack Brabham, Niki Lauda, James Hunt, and it's also the race in which a 24-year-old F1 rookie by the name of Ayrton Senna was in the field. They were all racing Mercedes 190E Cosworth engines, and in the race, Senna drove excellently, taking all the curbs, driving like a true professional. He came out on top, and people like John Surtees recommended to Enzo Ferrari that Senna should be signed up for the Ferrari F1 team. So certainly made an impression. Okay.
Yes, it's well, from certainly media coverage, driving talent that has not really been seen again. But it is obviously difficult to get. Oh, as we watch Nick have a wobbly moment through the Schumacher S's, I imagine that was a bit scary. But yes, it's often difficult to sort of compare professional drivers just because of the difference between generations and technology. Like sort of the Sebastian Vettel of today, the difference in the challenges he faced to even sort of to Schumacher's era is enormously different in terms of the amount of downforce, even the sort of processes that you had to use. I think, well, Schumacher is a good example insofar as he had to bridge the gap between manual and paddle shift transmissions, along with that sort of an enormous amount of electronic assistance. And so, well, for me, he's one of my favourite F1 drivers in that he did manage to do that and seemingly took it in his stride, and it was just easy for him. Whereas, certainly, with Senna as an example, he definitely struggled with the well-known clause in F1, which is that you need the car that can win as well as the driver that can win.
Yes. I believe back in the day when Senna first jumped in a McLaren, I believe, don't quote me on that, he complained about the driving aids. So it just shows what a kind of driver he was. Very good one. Wow.
Yeah, certainly driver aids were the bane of Senna's life, and certainly his final season in 1994, he was convinced that the Benetton was running traction control after it had been banned, which obviously would have lent it a huge advantage at the time. As we watch Ayrton Schumacher and Mini Stiggy. So Ayrton Schumacher has now made it into second, having passed Memto in the pits. We'll see if Glenn Alls and Nick can do the same. And Glenn Alls has, but Nick looks like he's about to come out, so if we could watch them, there we go. Brilliant. So yes, we've now got a three-way battle for third. With the Pescarolo, Bentley and Audi all in very close proximity.
Yes.
So it seems, for the moment at least, that Ayrton Schumacher's tactic is working out. As we discussed, he'll obviously have to do that extra 40 seconds towards the end of the race. But it will be interesting to see if he can make the difference or not.
One thing that's amazed me is the innovation within the WEC series and LMP Le Mans prototypes in particular. I mean, we've seen everything from the Group C days to, I mean, this year even with the hybrid power units, that's been certainly a spectacle.
Yes, it's commonly been the source of a huge amount of innovation. As we watch Glenn Alls go off, so Memto has now got a very clean run past, and I believe Nick will manage to do it too. As he gets blocked very heavily, but will he make it past on the brakes? It looks like it, and he's had to go very deep, and I believe that's definitely been some contact. So Glenn Alls, very, very assertive driving there. I don't know if you watched the Formula E race earlier today, Tom, but the victory in the end came down to a final corner move in which Nicola Prost did a fairly similar bit of defensive driving against his teammate Nick Heidfeld on the Rebellion LMP team, and yes, that also didn't end particularly well for you in the car.
It didn't, and I saw the final lap. I didn't watch all of it due to needing sleep. Yeah. But Formula E certainly is a exciting new sport.
Yes, it'll be fascinating to see how quickly innovation comes from it, because the thing about technology is obviously unless people are using it in a manner that is reasonably competitive, be that for market share or for actually racing, it won't get developed. And so with this, as we watch Glenn having a mistake, and he's collected Nick, I think.
No, she made it away.
I think she's just made it past, yes. That was...
And I believe Mini Stiggy... No, there's no way Mini Stiggy can capitalise on that mistake due to he is about a lap, just under a lap behind, so...
I believe that Memto and Nick are actually just following Mini Stiggy on the track. Obviously, Stiggy is a lap down, but hopefully he's not losing heart, just because certainly a mistake like that for Glenn. He's just coming through the final chicane now, so that's cost him easily, what, 40 seconds at least, and I imagine, yes, he's pitting for damage.
That's another 30. So.
Yes, and that's already the best part of the lap. So Mini Stiggy could be well in for a or certainly made good points. As yes, we switch to the timing screen and we see that Nin is once again easily a second ahead as far as pace goes, and on that final lap, well over 2 seconds, with Memto almost matching him, but certainly Ayrton Schumacher has got the pace to drive away from him.
There's still battle between Memto and Nick remains with about 2 seconds between them, so it should be interesting to see when they next come together for some epic race.
Yes, it will be interesting to see, having been slowed down slightly by Glenn, whether Nick can then use all of the skill that he's got, or she has got, to catch Memto. But yes, Memto is renowned for playing the long game as far as sort of the strategy goes. So I imagine he's not giving it all he can at the moment. He's just holding back, seeing where he sort of ends up with 20 minutes, half an hour to go. Just because at the moment it looks like he could be well on for or being right up behind Ayrton. And so he'll be looking to capitalise on people's mistakes, and if they make one, then he'll just pick off that position and say thank you very much and just keep driving his own race. Sorry, go on.
Yes, we're about 20 laps in, and there's approximately an average of 1 pit stop. So how many pit stops do you reckon this is going to be? I know you quoted 5, but with one Everett.
As I said, I believe Ayrton Schumacher is definitely on a 5-stop strategy. So 1 stop every 20 minutes. So he should be back into the pits, I believe, next lap, maybe the lap after. Memto and... Memto made it to the full half an hour before he actually came in. And so I believe he's actually going to try and do a 3-stop strategy. And as we saw from the time gained by Nick and Glenn, they were both sort of pitting about 25 minutes, or 26 minutes even, which should put them on 4 stops. I will admit I've completely failed to follow what Mini Stiggy's strategy is, or many of the GTE field.
RCB has the field's been in about once in the GTE. I mean, there's only one person who hasn't. That's David B. But I'll have to check. I think he's playing the long game. Yes, in the McLaren F1.
It's certainly 40 minutes on one set of tyres in Gran Turismo one pair of soft tyres in Gran Turismo is quite impressive. And while there are other tyres available, it comes back down to the exactly the same thing as doing more stops. Effectively, it's just that you can't get the lap time with the harder tyres that you can with the softer tyres, and so it doesn't matter if you have to pit more often, you'll still be further up the road than you will if you're running harder tyres. And obviously, combined with that is, with the softer tyres you have to pit more frequently, which means that you can put more fuel in the car, so you don't have to then waste extra time doing that, because unlike the real WEC, in Gran Turismo you do simultaneous tyre changes and refuelling.
Which is unlike its real life counterpart, due to, I mean, I've seen WEC races where, and certainly in the world of GT racing, where they've stuck duct tape to the car to fix damage.
Yes, it would be interesting if Gran Turismo had some form of... In fact, yes, as we go, we've just passed the 40-minute mark and we see Ayrton Schumacher has pitted, so I'd be fairly confident in my 5 stops call. But yes, it would be interesting if Gran Turismo had some form of
magic duct
level
tape.
of bias to the damage, or that if you had to pit for damage it would take longer than a normal stop.
Yes.
And
It's you.
certainly it would be nicer if there was that sort of difference between running into a wall at 200 miles an hour with your one of your front corners most exposed and just getting suspension damage, compared to rolling backwards into the wall at, say, 30 miles an hour and being rewarded with suspension damage and engine damage, which is a far worse penalty. But obviously, in one accident, the car would be entirely recoverable, and the other, it would have been written off and sort of enormous concerns for driver safety. So that's an element that isn't really covered by the Gran Turismo series yet.
I do remember in an interview in about 2002 when Gran Turismo 2 was released. I don't think it was 2002, but in that era, he did quote the Kaz, the game owner and creator, did quote that he didn't want to see visible damage in the game because no one wants to see the manufacturers and people don't want to see their cars damaged. If like in Forza they've got that, and in P cars they've certainly got that, but it's a thing that we haven't got. So
yes. Well, in a way, the sort of visible damage is a secondary factor to it. It's I suppose from a commentary point of view, it's a good way of sort of doing that initial diagnosis of what's wrong with the car. But certainly, from a gameplay perspective, it would be theoretically possible to simulate sort of actual damage and the effects that would have without actually changing the model displayed, which would be a workaround. But yes, there's possibly not actually much use in talking of flights of fancy when we've got a race in our hands, as we watch Nick still adamantly pursuing Memto. She seems like she hasn't really closed up the gap. I don't know if you can get more details, but I imagine the lap time is about the same for the moment.
Yes. Although Memto does have... No, Nick has a faster lap with a 140.6 and Memto behind that was a 140.79, so certainly Nick has a pace if she feels like it, and the last laps are the same, so this could be, the gap is going to be perfectly maintained because they're so equal.
Yes, there's one of the trade-offs with the getting into the routine that you were talking about earlier is that it's very easy to... complacent is probably the wrong word, but it's very easy to sort of just lose that tiniest bit of focus as far as your concentration goes. And at that point, especially if you suddenly realise that you need to go faster than you're going, it's very easy to make silly little mistakes. Certainly, though, that's the time when you're sort of at your biggest risk of ruining your race. Is not sort of at the start or at the end or when you're battling with someone. It's when you're just sort of turning in the laps in a way that's sort of so routine you're almost not thinking about it, and you are thinking about your strategy and you are thinking about where the car in front of you is. And it's just very difficult to then be able to switch back and say, no, now I need to put in 3 or 4 qualifying laps and to just pay attention to exactly everything that you're doing while driving the car.
If you've got any questions, pop them into the core page on Facebook or drop them in the live stream comment section and we'll get them answered as quickly as possible. Right.
So yes, we're riding on board with Ninjin, who is leading the race in a resplendent manner. He's just about to pass Duke Adam, and I believe we just watched Glenn Owls doing the same pass. So he is in fact about to come up to lap the bottom half of the LMP field, which, especially 46 minutes in, is impressive pace in cars that, as we've commented on earlier, are able to be balanced so evenly.
The Ninchin is about 36 seconds in front of Memto, so certainly he's found a technique that is efficient. So
yes, much as we talked of earlier in the sort of Sebastian Vettel style of victory, the difficulty with that, as I was just saying, is that there is that trade-off in that if it's so easy to drive away from the field, it is difficult to then keep yourself sort of focusing on it. And one of the things that has impressed me most with Ninjin is that he does not only have that incredible qualifying pace, but he is just able to turn in the laps again and again and again and just not make mistakes, basically.
He's both mentally capable and physically capable for racing. His pace is unbelievable. He can certainly do the racing, and his mind is that of a racing driver.
Yes, very much so. As we're just cycling through the LMP field now, it seems. So we've got Nick McAzoy in third, and she's just about to pass David B, who I believe has now taken his pit stop, and that's why he's fallen down the order. We do, however, see RCB in the pits, having already lost his position to Nico. So I wonder if you could look into what's going on there, Tom, just because I imagine that would be for damage.
I'm not quite sure, as we've already seen Schumacher, Glenn Owls and Mini Stiggy both do 2 pit stops. Yes, we've got Matthias and coming in for a second pit stop now. So I don't believe it was for damage. I believe it was a routine stop.
That may well be. It just surprised me that Nico had already made it into the lead, because I thought he was a few seconds behind at least.
I think
yes. Sorry, go on.
I think he made it up when RCB, I believe one of the GT front runners did go into the pits. Yes, it must have been RCB, and Nicodemus did take the lead.
Right. So yes, as you look at the gap between the GT field, there's about 21 seconds, so Nico will indeed lose his lead when he comes in for his second stop. I believe that Duke Adam will be doing the same thing for Matthias when he stops, and David B is obviously running the far longer strategy at the back of the field, so we'll see if he can manage to make it up into sort of 4th or 3rd in class by the end of the race.
It should be interesting to see. I mean, we've not really talked about the GT cars as much as we should have, to be fair.
Yes, we seem to be following the LMPs quite a lot. I believe that what have we got? We've got Nico is obviously, he's been right up there all season really in that Corvette.
I'm a recent purchaser of the Corvette, and the lovely sound it makes. It's a big rumble. The capability of it round the corners is quite surprising. Certainly destroying the stereotype of American cars can't turn.
Yes, it is a fantastic car, and certainly one that bucks the somewhat underwhelming trend with Gran Turismo sounds. But yes, and certainly in real life it was a car that had enormous amounts of success in both America, or racing in America, and at the international scene at Le Mans. As we watch Ninchin just driving past, in fact, yes, that's RCB, the GT, or will inherit the GTE lead in a little while.
Yes.
And yes, that is indeed Glenelg's ahead of Nin, so it will be interesting to see the sort of comparative lap pace of just how quickly Nin manages to catch him up. But yes, going back to the GT field, there's Nico and the Corvette, which is proved to be a very strong car through the corners, and certainly the amount of lateral grip it has is very good compared to the likes of the BMW. So obviously RCB has done quite well to get a good setup on that car. The BMW, as we said earlier, has got very good straight line speed, but suffers slightly from the amount of cornering grip. I don't actually know much about the real life car that's based on.
The M3 GT, is that?
Yes, that's the one.
I do know there is a DTM version of the M3 which has been very capable this year.
I believe this year it's the M4 actually, which is
last year then.
a testament to BMW and their onwards and upwards marketing strategy.
Yes.
Yes. Certainly, I remember that the M3 GTE car was fairly widely criticised by the sports car sort of community, by the fact that it is, as you look at it, a two-door saloon car rather than a GTE car. But obviously it put a lot of those doubts to rest when it did prove itself to be a very quick race winner.
You can't call a car with a 4.4 litre V8 in the front of it not a supercar. It's got supercar figures and certainly supercar performance, and I believe this is the version from the Nurburgring 24 Hours of 2012, I believe, in which it did receive a class victory, so pretty good.
Yes,
Pretty
the
good
cars
car.
were very fast round the N24, and they I forget which class they ran in, just because the N24, real life N24, runs to classes that include FIA spec GT4 and GT3 cars, but they're named differently. I believe SP9 is GT3, and those are exact GT3 cars, but every now and then there are GT2, or what has become GTE cars, such as Porsches and indeed these BMWs, which I believe run in SP7, but I'm not sure, and I think they also run with extra ballast.
Certainly there is a varied amount of classes in the N24. I mean, this year I watched it and we had everything from the R8 to a Opel Manta, I believe.
Yes, the Opel Manta is well known with the foxtail that sits on its aerial.
Yes.
Yes, it's an enormously diverse event, which I think all of us would love to drive in, just because there is that difference between the GT3 cars, so 5.2 litre Lamborghinis and Audis, McLaren MP4s, Aston Martin with their 6 litre V12, and then Clio RSs, so a 2 litre hatchback. Those are sort of in almost road trim, and I seem to remember there's a long-standing competitor in a Golf Mark IV, which has got the sort of manual transmission, clutch, all the rest of it, and doing that for 24 hours must be an ordeal, shall we say.
I'd rather do that than being an automatic, but that's my personal opinion. We've got SP9. They're your Audi R8s, your Audi R8s and your normal GT3 cars, as you said. Then we've got the SP7 class, which is, I believe, a lot of Porsche 911s. Yep.
Yes, so those are the. I believe they're a GT3R. Is that right? I forget the actual designation, but as I said, I think those are the combination of Porsche Cup and Porsche GTE cars.
Yeah, you're correct in saying that. We have. This is going to be really mixed up because we've got SP4T, which apparently here is an Audi TT RS, SP3T, an Audi TT RS 2 litre, and this year we've seen the BMW M235i's a hell of a lot, and as they're so cheap to start racing in, it's certainly shown. The new car this year, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I seem to remember a story from the commentary of that is that the BMW Motorsports entered a car to sort of prove it in case all went wrong, and the customer teams all fail out. They felt the need to enter a car to say, we're here and we've got this and it does work, honestly. But they kindly entered themselves into a different class that didn't have prize money, so that the customer teams could actually compete for that, which is certainly a good bit of PR, if you ask me.
Just seeing them on the grid, just racing against each other. Yeah, there's a lot of classes here, by the way. I'm just going to skip through to see the most. Yeah, there was an SP2T class with a mini John Cooper works in, so...
Yes, minis are often there. I believe most of them are done by... most of the classes are done by engine displacement. So, SP2T, I believe, is up to 2 litres and turbocharged, or it might be over 2 litres. I always forget which way around it goes. But certainly SP9 and SP7 are the confusing ones, in that they don't actually fit into that. And there's SP8, I think, which are cars over 5 litres, but that can have an amount of racing modifications to them. So there's the Lexus LFAs, which have been long-standing entrants in that, I think.
The Lexus ISF CCSR is also in SP8. Anyway, we're getting way late here. Hey, look.
Slightly sidetracked, such as the effects of the Nurburgring. So yes, we're following RCB, who is still second in class as we're approaching the 1 hour mark, so almost half distance. I believe from that it would mean that Nico is trying to do a 3-stop. So we'll see how effective that is. Obviously the telltale sign of whether he's got the pace to do it at the moment is whether he is under or over 20 seconds behind when he comes out behind RCB, as we watch Mento doing his stop, and I believe he's out again, and yes, Nick is right on his tail once more. So yes, just past the hour mark, Mento is well on for his 3 stops. And the problem he's got though is that, actually I suppose if he's still ahead he's technically in hand, but I believe that Nick will be able to pass him on this stint, having already got warmed up tyres and probably carrying less fuel, but I'll have to see how it plays out.
While we've been talking about the Nurburgring, there has been if my memory is all it used to be, a few position changes, such as, I think, I'm just look. It's like some This is a mental game. This is
I believe they're all running in roughly the same order. I think Mini Sticky has made it up to the end of the GTE field. Ed and Schumacher is running an alternate strategy, so when he pits again, which should be happening fairly soon, Memto, Nick will pass him, and Glenn Owls, I think, has fallen back enough that won't happen. Nin is obviously leading as he has been, and then Nico is leading RCB as they're on slightly alternate strategies, and then Matthias is leading Duke, who is leading David. I think that's the same order, but
I think it is the same order. But one thing that has certainly changed is the fastest lap holder, with a 1:39.4 is GTP Mini Sticky, and
wow, that is a surprise. I'm fairly inexperienced with Stiggy and his driving career, but yes, certainly that's impressive stuff, although it may be more a testament to just how little pressure Nin has on him and just not feeling the need to risk it, compared to Stiggy, who has got to literally go 100% the whole way if he wants to get a decent result.
Stiggy is very, very well known within the community of online racing. He's a young chap, about my age, it's still a teenager compared to the rest of the field. His driving skills are remarkable. I was his teammate in a previous series, and his knowledge about how to squeeze the fastest lap and everything is just spot on. It does win.
Yes, and as we see, Ed and Schumacher has indeed come to the pits now, and yeah, there go Memto and Nin past. Sorry, Memto and Nick even.
And Nicodemus has just gone into the pits and pole on the taking the lead for the GT cars.
Indeed he has. So yes, everything has momentarily restored itself, so it will be very interesting to see as we come down to the final minutes whether it will be Memto and Nick who have triumphed, or whether it will be Ed and Schumacher.
Sorry to interrupt you there, however, I believe RCB has just suffered a disconnection.
Oh, that's a shame. It does seem to be that this game picks on the cars that are fairly set for a comfortable victory.
If you're in the lead, you're in the target sites.
Yes.
Right, okay, let's just hope that doesn't happen again.
Yes, disconnections have been, or I say have been, they continue to be the bane of online racing, really, as there's all forms of latency, really, in that everyone would like to be able to race toe-to-toe and for things to happen exactly as they do effectively in single player, but just with real people. But there is obviously the difficulty of transmitting that signal quickly enough.
Yes.
As we see, Nick has actually just made it past Memto. So it will be interesting to see if she can drive away.
Yes. They've both been on their fastest laps that previous lap. But the connection issues, I think, comes from the wide range of areas we do have in core racing. I mean, tonight we've got representatives from Britain, Australia, Sweden, and America, so quite far away.
Yes, it's basically as far away as you can get, isn't it? We just need a couple of Japanese players and we'll have it all covered. But yes, there's I actually see that Memto has fallen quite a way behind, so I imagine that's actually a symptom of a bit of an off, so it may just be that he was a little bit enthusiastic on the accelerator or a little bit too late on the brakes and just ran slightly wide. But certainly, yes, it seems that Nick is well on his way as they both run exceptionally wide over that paved area.
Yes. You certainly can afford to do this in the first sectors because I believe the first sectors do have a lot of runoff.
Yes, the penalty is obviously though that with how tight the corners are, if you're running off, you're drastically increasing the distance that you have to travel, so there's not really any gain to it. But certainly through that left-right, there is the potential to just carry a lot more speed into the right-hand corner if you just run wide.
Yes. This is a very challenging track. I can never get to grips with this track. I don't claim to be a professional race driver like these guys are.
So you watch Memzo running very wide again. Yes, he's certainly very determined to make out that time, and he's in fact almost back on the tail of Nick now.
Yeah. He's certainly using the curbs and the bit after the curbs.
We watched Nick get very squirrely out of that corner, so we'll have to see, because I have a feeling that both these cars aren't quite as well set up as they could be. Because often you find you have to sacrifice a little bit of stability just to get that extra turn in and sort of lightness in the front end that it wants to grip.
Yeah. It's all about finding the perfect compromise. I mean, you can't have excellent turning and excellent grip out or vice versa. I don't know the specifics, but it's all about finding the compromise for the track.
Yes, and there's that classic case that if you've got a car that handles perfectly, it just means you're not pushing it hard enough.
Yes. If everything seems in control, you're not going fast enough.
And as we have mentioned, the problem with the WEC field is that if you're not pushing to that 100%, someone else will be. And so there's always that need to just go that little bit extra. As Memto has definitely got a lot closer, I believe. Well, my stream has gone slightly interesting at the moment, but yes, as we watch, I believe they're also catching Mini Stiggy right now, so I wonder if he's set his Wunderlap and then backed off slightly, or possibly had a mistake trying to set another. As if you just look at the comparative differences there, in order to get her lap time, Nick has to run very wide into that final, or the hairpin at the bottom of the hill, but Memto's car just has so much more grip into the corner, but then obviously loses it again on the straight.
As you mentioned, the mechanical grip, the grip in the corners from the Bentley is much superior to the R18's grip, and it certainly shows. If I'm right in saying the Bentley does a lot wider than the R18. I mean, it's a lot more flat.
I don't actually know. As far as I'm aware, the regulations have remained the same as far as width goes. Obviously, these two cars are almost a decade apart as far as design goes, and or at least as far as regulations go, they are in fact an entire decade apart, because the Bentley actually runs to the LMP 9. Or actually it runs to the LMGTP specification, which is for closed prototypes, but was very similar to the LM900 spec. But it certainly looks as if Memto has got the pace to go and make this move stick. They have closed right up on Mini Stiggy as well, so hopefully he'll move out the way and let them both through. And yes, he's letting Nick through now, and it's a question of whether Memento will manage to make it. I believe he's had contact with Memento, and that's a big crash. Yes,
he's off.
I think that Memento will have a thing to say to about that at the end of the race. That's yes, on a car that's laps down and has blue flags, it's definitely not on to try and put a pair of cars that are fighting into a too wide situation through a high-speed corner. I really don't see why he didn't just lift off and let them through, but
again, it's the compromise sort of wasn't met there, was it? Quite clearly.
yes, as we see that Ed Schumacher has in fact now passed Memento. So despite the fact that he's just made despite the fact he's just made his pit stop, Ayrton has in fact gained back all that time that Memento needed to make his strategy work. So that's fairly unfortunate, and without an accident on the Ayrton and Nick's part, I doubt he'll make that back.
He's certainly on the tail of Ayrton. I mean, they're the same cars, and Memento previously has been quicker than Schumacher in the lap time, so it should be an interesting battle. But as you never know, really.
And yes, we switch to the GT fields. We watch Matthias is in fact closing up on Duke Adam, I believe, and I imagine this is an out of sync pit stop on Adam's behalf, but certainly he's either moved up or Matthias has had a mistake or a pit stop. And so it'll be interesting to see what the black and blue wheeled McLaren can do.
Did Memento go to the pits after his incident, or did he not suffer any damage? I don't
believe so. I think he just got pushed wide.
Alright, okay. And it seems now people are making their third pit stop, so Schumacher.
Schumacher, I believe, pitted at the hour mark. So he's actually more than halfway through his stint now and should be pitting in about another
20,
well, probably within
minutes.
the next 10 minutes.
Yes. Glenn Owls and Mini Stiggy are also on 3 laps, so just to recap, that's Schumacher, Glenn Owls, Mini Stiggy, Duke Adam, and Matthias. Is that right? And they're all on 3 laps. It should be interesting to see the pit stop strategy, and it certainly makes the race a lot more interesting as it adds that extra aspect of worrying about your tyre wear and your fuel wear, as it always is.
Yes, of course, the problem with the limited public testing that we get to run in this series is that it's very difficult once you've made your decision about lap time, or sorry, not lap time, pit strategy, to then alter that in reaction to other cars. So quite a lot of the time you'll find that drivers are waiting for other drivers to pit, and this can often lead to situations where both of you are waiting to react to the other, as we see that Nick has now headed into the pits, and I would imagine that Glenn Owls will be heading in this lap as well, and if he hasn't already. But yeah.
He has, yes. He's on his pit stop, yes. And it goes down to 4th place. Schumacher takes 2nd and Memento takes 3rd. This should change once she gets a new rubber.
Indeed, so now the battle for seconds is fairly limited to Ed and Nick, but Memento is obviously not particularly far behind, and given his strategy, it would actually be possible for him to now mirror end, which obviously would be beneficial for him in that it will mean that he can just match him, and if, as you said, he can drive faster as he's demonstrated, then
being funny about that, being funny how you mentioned that they could mirror each other. They've just set exactly the same first 2 sector times, so they're taking it literally.
oh, we do our best, don't we?
So as we come on to lap 44, the standings are Ninchin in first, Ayrton Schumacher in second with the Bentley, Memto89 in third with the second Bentley, Nick McCullsey in the Audi R18, the first and only Audi R18, if I'm correct in saying, and Glenn Owls, who's a reserve in the Pest Roller in fifth. We've got GTP Mini Stiggy, who came in
The second Peugeot.
the second Peugeot, who came in after qualifying, is in sixth. Leading the GTE field is Nicodemus in the Corvette C6 car. Duke Adam in second with the RX7 1 car, and we've got Matthias in the, I'm correct in saying, just check that, McLaren F1. Yes, McLaren F1. And we've got David B in,
He's also in a McLaren, I believe.
yes, he's also in the McLaren, and he's got last on the grid, last in the field.
Yes, and we did, of course, have RCB, who was running in the BMW as well, who unfortunately lost connection, so is now retired. It's a shame that we didn't get to see how his battle with Nico would play out.
Yes. Do you believe he'll gain any extra points for this? Because he did. I do believe there is a rule about laps led, but I'm not quite sure on that.
Yes, I think there is a rule of laps led if you don't win the class, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if you have to have completed the 70% rule to get those points or not.
70%, okay. That clearly, it's about, there was about 50% of the way through that he disconnected anyway, so just did
Yes.
Nicodemus pitted.
Yeah, so as we approach 1 hour and 20 minutes, we've got 40 minutes left, so now's the sort of time that drivers will be planning out their final strategies and deciding whether they can actually make an offensive move towards the cars in front of them, whether they need to be defensive and plan sort of their moves around what the cars behind them are doing, or if they've actually got to a fairly secure place and can just carry on doing what they're doing. It seems that Memto has actually fallen backwards slightly from Ed Schumacher, so as we watch him drifting quite spectacularly in the Bentley there, it's quite likely that he's pushing fairly hard, I would imagine.
I could imagine he would, being 4 seconds behind Schumacher is his teammate. No, they certainly share the same car. Yes, he is. He's losing time on 18 seconds. So
Yes, it may be a case. As he has another very big slide through the final chicane. He's it might be that he's actually carrying damage, but just sticking to his strategy nonetheless. He has another big slide.
right, I'll just I'll check on my screens to see if that's due to latency or anything.
Yes, I would imagine that the red mist is descending after his indignant, shall we say, movement from the track.
Yes. He's certainly going for it in the Bentley.
Yes,
Big.
he certainly is, isn't he? And we've now following Nick, who is, I believe, just behind the pair of Mini Stiggy and Memto. Mini Stiggy is obviously still a lap down, but is quite close to Memto on the road, so it's possible that trying to get past the lapped car again is what caused Memto to fall so far behind Ed and Schumacher.
Yes, we've got Mini Stiggy just behind Memto, and Nick's gonna come up, and hopefully Stiggy won't get in the way, but I hope to think that the blue flags will adhere to blue flags. Could we get a flick to Memto, please?
Oh, yes, he's just had an off, hasn't he? We saw him recovering. I imagine that if he didn't have damage previously, he does now.
Yes, he come out that quick corner
onto the back straight.
He hit the inside wall. He's going in for damage anyway. This shouldn't affect him too badly, being as he was only on 2 stops anyway, and he was due for fuel. So
yes, it does mean, however, he'll have to stretch out a stint to 37 minutes, which certainly in an LMP car, it is doable, but it will mean that he'll have a significant amount of time lost. He's been followed into the pit lane by Ninjin, so I imagine soon he'll be a lap down.
Yes, he will be. Ninjin has been very dominant up front with a 1 minute gap from the rest of the field.
Yeah, certainly, as we see Nick's just passing the bottom end of the circuit, which is give or take about halfway round, and Nin just leaving the pits.
The next
sorry, go on.
The next person Nick has to encounter, I believe, is Traffic or someone else.
I believe he's following Mini Stiggy, and Glenn Ells is just disconnected.
Yes,
So
Glenn Ells.
that does promote Mini Stiggy, although unfortunately that was possibly the one car Mini Stiggy could have caught, so might actually be disheartening rather than encouraging. But yes, certainly it does mean that Memto is slightly safer, since after his unfortunate punting and then that accident, he was slightly at risk from the Pescarolo, but yes, now he seems fairly safe.
Yes.
Go on.
You.
Oh, we're now following Ed and Schumacher as he navigates around Nico and traffic. He's had a fairly quiet race, it has to be said. He's just mostly got on with what he's doing without too much hassle, as we follow Duke. Oh no, we follow Matthias, who is actually fallen back from Duke Adams, so I may have been being unfairly judgmental and saying that it was due to pit strategy, and I believe that the RX-7 is actually driving away from the McLarens, which it's always unfortunate when you see that both of your team cars are sort of at the bottom of the pit field. It does just make you think, or sort of feel slightly hopeless, and there's nothing you can really do to improve matters, and just that it's not actually your fault, and you feel sort of almost indignant about it.
The McLaren F1 is a good car, but is being outdone by an RX-7. Not that the RX-7 is. That's not that surprising because it's an RX-7. The RX-7 is a good car in its own right. Digging myself a hole here.
Yes, I think we'll save the matters by saying it's important to remember that WEC specs, or certainly core WEC specs, don't reflect the actual performance of the cars. In that the true McLaren F1 was, well, to call it the ultimate road car is possibly limiting its field, since it's the last production-based Le Mans winner to have succeeded, and in a time when prototypes were rife and sort of the expected norm is even more of an achievement.
The McLaren, if I am correct in saying, is a 90s car, which is kind of old. It's the oldest car on the field, I believe.
Yes, I would imagine it's between that and the RX-7.
No, that model of RX-7 came out in about 90s, the late 90s and the early 2000s. So,
yes, or certainly that model of McLaren was the 95 season, I believe, before being replaced in 97 by the long-tail variant, which was also a very handsome car to behold.
Didn't the McLaren F1 have lights from the rear lights were borrowed off of a bus?
Yes, an Italian bus is where they come from, which, as far as facts go, is definitely one of the stranger ones.
Yes.
But of course, it's important to remember that certainly many of the most beautiful cars in history have actually had lights borrowed from fairly humble sources. The Aston Martin DB4 and DB5 had brake lights from a Land Rover Defender, and the Lamborghini Miura had, I believe, lights from a Fiat, though I forget which one, which they then hid with the eyelashes, as they call them. Yes, go on.
That was the McLaren F1 is certainly a lot older than me, and it's even older than some of the people on the grid, as we're seeing the young online racing really number of people, different ages, different circumstances, different places. It's just so diverse, and the people that you meet through online racing are friends that you'll have forever, I believe. So
yes, it definitely is a tight community, and certainly there does seem to be that contrast between the younger players who seem to have the pace, who seem to be able to just go and go and go, and the older players who are often not quite as fast, but who have that sort of level of patience and control that means that they're able to just turn in lap after lap that's consistent and clean, and they just sort of keep themselves out of trouble.
Whether you're doing it out of work, or after you come home from work, or after you come home from school, or in your weekend, it doesn't matter. It's just a bunch of people with the same inspiration to to challenge themselves as they feel fit. And really, online racing is to prove yourself in a field and improve and learn, and it's a great environment. I'm gonna go on a tangent here. It's a great environment, but yep, leave it at that. Wonderful.
And as we look at the timing screen, we see that Mini Stiggy has in fact defended his fastest lap. I believe Ninchin might have been... Actually, I think Ninchin's lap times remain the same, but yes, Mini Stiggy has gone even faster again. So it's slightly strange in that he seems not to be gaining very much time compared to the other LMP cars overall, but he certainly has the pace to knock real blinders out of that Peugeot.
Yeah,
As we look at... Sorry.
Yes, he is 28 seconds behind Memto 89. It'll be interesting to see if he can make up the pace before the end of the race. I believe we have just check 28 minutes left, so a second a minute.
Well, he's not made a good start. As we look at the last lap times, he's almost a full second slower. So he clearly had some issues. As we follow Nico Dermis's car, just going into the sort of horseshoey complex in the centre of the track. He's got a minute and 30 lead to Duke Adams, so he should have the GTE lead pretty much wrapped up. Matthias is about 15 seconds behind again from Duke, so there could be some excitement there towards the end of the race, but as you said, the clock is ticking down. And David B is, I believe, quite near the back, but even so, he should be able to pick up some decent points from just turning in the laps now.
What we do see is when the drivers start to make their final pit stop, they tend to go all out, which creates some of the fastest laps we'll see in the race. So I believe that Mini Stiggy and Ninchin are quite possibly capable of getting a 138 down into the 138. So even anyone could do it. We don't know. So just that sees how people turn up the heat as a race progresses.
Indeed, and it's also important to remember that they're at the lowest fuel there as well. Of course, one of the elements of the core WEC we've failed to mention is that this is, of course, a team race. So while these guys are racing and have been racing for 2 hours, tomorrow night, their counterparts will take over and resume in effectively the same position. So while I'm sure Ninchin is tempted to go and set fastest laps, he does have to keep very much in his conscious mind that he needs to get this car home for Zoramir in the best possible place. And obviously, while going faster is a good idea, it does also increase the risk, and so he's probably thinking to himself that it's not actually worth the risk trying to get fastest lap.
Yeah.
When he could end up throwing away what is, as you said, almost a full lap lead.
Because you never know what GT6 has up its sleeve. You could spin out, crash into a wall, flip everywhere, and then I've never seen that move. Just let my imagination run wild again. As we see Mini Steve coming in for a pit stop, I believe. So that's his fourth one. And David B's doing a very good job at conserving tyres with only 2 pit stops over 53 laps.
That is very impressive. Yeah, he has actually done, 40 minutes a stint, which is,
well,
nothing short of masterful, really. As we follow the glorious yellow Corvette of Nico Dermis, as we said before, will be in a similar position to Ninchin, really. We've seen that the BMW has got very good race pace, and so he'll be wanting to make sure that they can absolutely capitalise on the misfortune of that team. And certainly, I believe Duke Adams' teammate is Need for Speed, or I forget. I think it's Need for Speed, who has proved himself to be incredibly quick.
What do you think of Nicodemus's lead in the GTE category so far? Because
I'd say at the moment it's fairly unassailable.
It certainly is a delightful car, the Corvette. we've seen it in international racing for a while. I mean, this year we've seen the C7 iteration at Le Mans, and the lovely V8 rumble that you get from that car is it's unlike any other car on the field. It's just mean and evil, and it just sounds so good.
Yes, and we will indeed get to see the C7 next weekend as it rejoins the WEC for the round at the Circuit of the Americas. It's a fairly curious car in that over the course of the Corvette's lifetime there have been a lot of innovations. Sort of one of the most obvious features is they use a rear view camera that features object tracking. So much like in Gran Turismo, where you've got the proximity markers on the left and right of the screen, it picks out the cars that are following you and has an arrow that I believe turns progressively redder as they get closer.
Yes, I believe that works in conjunction with all of the cars' radio sensors and equipment like that. The innovation that's going on in GT now really is good stuff to watch. Certainly, since I've made the transition from F1 to GT racing, I've seen the light. So if you could put it that way.
Yes, it is very easy to get caught up in the world of F1 and think it's the only form of motorsport. But the thing to remember is that obviously F1 cars, by their very nature, being incredibly lightweight, incredibly reliant on aerodynamics, doesn't actually make them very good at racing with each other.
Yes.
Whereas GT cars, because they're bigger, they have more bodywork to protect the fragile parts.
And you can go
they
side
have less
to side.
downforce. Yeah, they can race nose to tail for, well, Blancpain races are, I believe, 3 hours long, most of them.
Yeah.
And you do get to see cars that just race nose to tail the entire 3 hours through sort of different driver changes.
Recently, and this year, in fact, I dragged my family along, my siblings along to the 6 hours of Silverstone, the World Endurance Championship.
Ah, yes.
And the first we started off with the Formula 3 cars, and they were like meow, not really loud and not really uncomfortable, but certainly woke up. And then when the GTE cars came out, it just erupted with noise and vibration. It's just lovely. It's like you don't realize it from YouTube videos and all that. It's so intense. It's insane.
Yes,
Insane.
I'm exactly aware of what you mean, and for those of our viewers who haven't been to a race day ever, it is well worth going to see, well, literally anything, just because if you see historics, you get sort of 3 litre straight 6 E-types, which are still incredibly loud and beautiful, as you said. But yeah, there's that sort of feeling of vibration in your chest and that extra sort of clarity to the noise that you just don't get through videos.
Yeah, you can have the best headphones in the world, but they'll never actually inflict damage on your hearing system like a car will. I think the most comfortable, the place where is the most comfortable to listen to the cars. If you want to listen to cars, sit in the car park. That's my only advice for you. That's what it's like having your headphones on and watching a video of cars compared to the sound. It really is. Sat in my car eating picnic. That sounds right. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, get yourself out there, get yourself down to a race. If you can't even manage a race, but I suggest going along to a practice day, and they're usually very cheap. I mean, £10 it cost me to see the race to see through practice.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Tom. We've got GTP Mini Stiggy has made huge gains on Ayrton Schumacher now. So I believe he's trying to unlap himself, and it will be interesting to see how this goes down, just because I believe that well, Ed might not want to cede this place, but he does have to remember that Mini Stiggy has had an interesting time with Memto as they're going side by side through the interior complex, and I believe Glenn has gone and forced the issue and pushed him out wide.
Yes.
But it'll be interesting to see whether the Peugeot's power can go and pull him down the straight.
If Mini Stiggy believes that he can pass him under the regulations, he has a right to pass him if he feels he's faster. So.
Yes, but I believe the regulations also state that the car that's a lap up is allowed to defend his position, much like he would be if they were actually fighting for position.
The racing to unlap them. I don't think. I believe that if Mini Stiggy wanted to, he could turn up the heat and unlap himself quite efficiently.
Yes, there is of course the risk involved of defending against a car that is potentially faster, not least because it drastically raises the amount of sort of stress that the driver is under. So it will be interesting to see, but at the moment I think that Ayrton Schumacher is under the impression that if Mini Stiggy did get in front of him, that he'd be equally held up, but they get very close coming into the final corner, so it'll be interesting to see if he can make the move down to start-finish straight.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but has Duke Adam lost out, or has he crashed, or because
he has indeed lost a position to Matthias, hasn't he?
Yes, by a good 24 seconds.
Oh really?
He's done 4 pit stops. I didn't realise he was coming into the pits, but he seems he has.
Yeah, so seems we missed that while we were talking about deafening ourselves. But yeah, certainly we got quite a lot of intense action in LMP at the moment, with lap traffic coming up as well, and I believe that's Nico Dermis. So that's the GTE leader. He should have, yeah, they'll get past fairly easily. But yes, certainly Nico has got plenty of time now to play with, so he doesn't have to force the issue at all. As we see, contact between the two, and I believe that's Mini Stiggy has just tapped Ayrton Schumacher's rear, which, as we were discussing earlier, it's not really on for a car that's lapped down to be forcing an issue like that in a way that is sort of debatable if they were actually fighting for the position.
Yes. As Core has the amazing steward team behind it, and every race is investigated in depth, and trust me, it is very in depth about any incident, and it's a very, very thought out process, isn't it?
And we see that Matthias has just come into the pits, and Duke Adam has already taken the position, it seems.
Yes,
so
he has.
I will admit, we missed that as well, but yes, it seems that all is well again, and that Duke Adam is back in second place in that lovely looking RX-7. And they will of course be the next ones on the list for Mini Stiggy and Ayrton Schumacher to get past.
Yes. It's interesting.
I've just realised I think Ayrton Schumacher got damaged from that contact because he's fallen behind Nick in the R18. So I think Ayrton Schumacher actually had to pit from that, which is definitely...
I'll check. Yes, he did. I believe he did anyway. Unless he's made his final lap, his final pit stop. I mean,
with 15 minutes to go, I would tend to assume that he would have done that already. But do you happen to know the gap between him and Nick?
22
Just
seconds.
going
Yeah,
past in front of the camera. So 22 seconds.
yeah, 20. And it appears Nick is on a personal best lap, last lap anyway, of a 1:39.7. So quite far off the overall fastest lap, but good work.
Yes, certainly as we watch Ed Schumacher, whose best lap is only a 1:40.3, you can see that Nick's really pushing to capitalise on this advantage now.
Yes. There seems to be like a 30-second gap between Nick and Ayrton Schumacher, and Ayrton Schumacher and Memto. There's also a 40-second gap. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so it's a shame that the race has played out the way it has in a way, just because it would have been interesting to see sort of the three cars fighting for second, all on different strategies, and just to see who came out on top. But certainly with that contact, it seems that Ed Schumacher has lost out, much in the same way that Memto did. So we'll have to see if Nick McElroy can keep out of damage.
Yes, it's been an amazing race by Ninchin, as he has lapped everyone on the field but Nick, I believe. Yes, I'm right in
Yeah,
saying.
well, you can see he's just ahead of Ayrton, so that would make sense. But yes, it's you can't really say anything to fault his drive this race, can you?
No, he's kept out of trouble, kept clean, kept his strategy. I mean, he's only pitted 3 times, which is quite remarkable.
So he was running a similar strategy to Memto then. Just amazing to see the difference in terms of speed that the two cars are able to achieve.
Yes.
It does look, however, as if Ed Schumacher, who's just pitted, has got a significant speed advantage over Nick at the moment, though. So it looks like he might be about to unlap himself. As we ride on board now, it's turn 1. Yes, we see him gain huge amounts in the road. Oh, he's actually run slightly deep into the corner there.
Yes, he has got new rubber, so he's got an advantage over Ninchin, who has been on the same tyres since...
Well, for the last half an hour, I'd imagine.
Yes.
Or 15 minutes, since we've got 15 minutes left. Or 10 minutes left, even.
10. Time flies when you're having fun.
Doesn't it just? But yeah, so you see, Ayrton is definitely closing up on Nin, so it'll be a question of whether he feels the need to force the move, like Stiggy did, or if he's happy to just sit and follow. I would imagine, in his current position, where he's not really under threat from Mento, and it's unlikely that he's going to gain that 20 seconds in the 10 minutes remaining, that he might be willing to just sit. Oh, but they go 3 wide into the S's. Nin's very wide, yet seemingly very unwilling to give up his position. What would you do in a situation like this? Just because if you're Ninchin, you're the leading car, you don't really need to keep this position, and he does actually seem to have let Ayrton through now. But there seems to be a lot of pride being kept by some of these drivers when they're facing situations that don't really require that level of
risk.
Sort of yeah.
Personally, if it was me driving, there would be. Yeah, I'm not very good at the whole spatial awareness thing. So, yeah. But if I was Ninchin and I had his skills, I'd probably just let him through. To be fair. Unless he wants to stay behind me, get my draft on the straight, so he has some chance of catching up into second.
Well, I think that was what happened in the end, wasn't it? That Ed made it past on the back straight, but I think the problem was that Ed identified that he was going a lot quicker than Ninjin. As we saw, he gained sort of 10 car lengths within the space of about 2 corners. So that's
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
advantage in terms of pace. And looking at the last laps, Nin was 2 seconds slower. So I would have thought it would be far better if he just moved out of the way, and certainly when they were going 3 wide up into that corner, that could have been a single misjudgment by any one of those 3, and that's a fairly catastrophic accident.
Yes. It's been a very, very interesting race in terms of negotiating back markers, hasn't it?
Yes, indeed. And that is, of course, the thing that makes multi-class racing both incredibly interesting and incredibly infuriating for the drivers involved and the fans.
Yes. Sometimes you just sit on the edge of your seat between 2 LMP cars racing, and then you get, say, a GTE car come up in front, and it's very interesting to see how they negotiate. There's like 2 races going on at once. It's insane. Good fun.
Yes, I a little while ago discovered the glory of the American Le Mans Series channel, in which they have the coverage of the sort of entire seasons of full races streamed. And one of the favourite sayings of the commentators is that traffic giveth and traffic taketh away.
Yes.
And yeah, there's not really a better way to sum it up, is there?
No. I think one of the best incidences where traffic has affected the racing I've ever seen is the ending of this year's N24. Not 24 Hours of Nurburgring in real life. What happened was there was a BMW Z4 trying to catch up to an Aston Martin V8, and in between there was racing at about 150. You could see from the aerial shots it was just epic and breathtaking, right? And then all of a sudden you get this plucky little Golf show up out of the middle of nowhere, and it just speeds past them, and then there's a bit of carnage, and then you've got it coming onto grass. Oh, it's mental. It's really is. Yeah.
So I think, well, possibly one of the most defining moments of traffic in motorsport was 2011 Le Mans, with the very same Audi R18 that we've got here, where 2 of the what were effectively race leaders got very forcefully removed by, in fact, I believe they were both Ferraris, but
Ferrari 458s, which is the popular choice of the inexperienced gentleman racer at Le Mans. It's been involved in a series of accidents. It just gets bad rep, the car does. So, shame.
yes, it makes you wonder if it's something to do with the way the mirrors look over the haunches.
Yeah.
But yes, certainly it is always a risk, and at Le Mans, much like in this series, it's got to the point where you just can't afford to give away lap time, and so they have to take the risks, and so there's very little that you can really do to prevent accidents like that happening.
Yes. Either way, if you're an LMP, you're not going to stick behind a GTE car. You've got to go past it if you even want to succeed. I mean, as we see Schumacher coming into the pits for some reason, I believe he was. Anyway.
Oh, he's hit the pit wall. He's hit the pit wall.
What? What even is this? Okay.
Oh, that suddenly changed everything. Can we see Memto's car and see how far behind he is?
Right.
He is in fact just going through the Schumacher S's, so I would imagine he's about 40 seconds behind.
Correct.
We've got 4 minutes or so left in the race. I would imagine he will follow Ayrton out of the pits. I imagine Ayrton will probably still have this in the bag by about 10 seconds. But certainly if he struggles at all, warming the tyres up or has a little wobble, it may be a lot closer than that. Oh, as we watch Memto having a wobble. Though, having said that, Ed still hasn't left the pits, and Memto is now heading down the start-finish straight.
Wait a minute, I'll just check. This will be very interesting to see. Is he not quit now?
Past him. He's still not left.
Could we please switch on to the stream of the Ayrton Schumacher, please?
In fact, yes, Mini Stiggy has passed him as well.
Because if you can't see anything, I can see the pit crew standing around doing nothing. Well done.
I believe he has retired the car. I feel we may have had to see that incident just because he was right next to Ninjin, and so I don't know if he tried to make a dive up the inside and got blocked, or possibly got spun out, but he certainly seems to have thrown in the race gloves, and I imagine he's walking off with his helmet on as we speak. So yes, Memto is one of the big winners out of that, who will now claim a podium place in race 1, and admittedly in the overall order it won't entirely help him in that he still has the effectively lap disadvantage to Ninjin for his co-driver to take over.
Yes. Right, okay, with about just under 2 minutes to go, we'll say that this is subject to change as we've just seen. Right, we've got Ninjin in the Peugeot 908 in first, leading the field by quite a large amount. We've got Nick McCossie, who's had a good race in the Audi R18, in second. Memto 89, the first of the Bentleys, in third. Fourth, we've got GTP Mini Sticky in the second of the Peugeot 908, and he also has a current best lap of 1:39.1. We've just had in fifth is Ayrton Schumacher in the second Bentley. We currently do not know what's happened, but we'll get to the bottom of that for you. And the leader of the GTE class is Nicodemus in the Corvette C6. Duke Adam in second with the RX-7 Le Mans car. Matthias in the McLaren F1, I believe.
Yes.
And yes, David B in ninth with a McLaren F1. And his very conservative driving style, I do have to commend him. Yes.
Yes, we watch Nick McCossie McCossie even just attempting to pass Memto now, and yes, Memto doesn't fight him too hard, so that's a lap up for Nick and a lap down for Memto.
Alright.
As the clock ticks down, I don't know where Ninjin's car is. In fact, if you look, Mini Stiggy is right up behind Memto now. So that's
going through the S's, I believe, and then
they will get one more lap because Ninjin hasn't crossed the line. So this is going to be very, very close for the battle for third.
Yes.
Wow, just look at how much time he can gain just on the brakes there.
Is this a race for position? I believe it is.
This is a race for position, yeah. And there he goes. He's done it. Oh, they've both gone very wide though. And Memto will be back through, yes.
Sorry, I'm getting excited.
Well, it's very intense, isn't it?
Oh, no,
yes, Ninjin has just crossed the line and taken the victory. So congratulations to him for winning the LMP class, but unfortunately we're going to focus on this battle, as Mini Stiggy's got a far tighter line through that corner.
I'm sorry.
I believe Mento's gone defensive and will try and force him to the outside. And yes, he's gone. Mento's run it very wide, just pushing the 908 out.
Side and side, no, okay. So a battle of braking here.
Nemzo will probably keep left and force Stiggy out to look wide again. Well, he's got enough of a gap that he doesn't need to, and Stiggy's gaining again in the corners. Just that 908 has so much more grip than the Bentley does at the moment.
He's certainly hopping the nose through, but that's not enough. Will he get him on the chicane? It'll be a close call.
It seems Memto has defended well enough, but look at how close he is. He's all but there. He might be able to get a better run through this corner and just drive through. Oh, I think they've had contact, and that's ruined his momentum. But still, what a close result.
That was the final piece of drama in the race called WEC Race 10 at the Nurburgring. Now we'll just see all the cars coming over the line. And I believe the next person is Nicodemus. Oh no, he's going over the line.
I believe Nico has already finished. In fact, I believe the entire field has already crossed the line. I think those two were the last ones we were waiting for.
Yes, I believe you are correct. Okay.
So yes, a fantastic race to the flag for 3rd place in LMP, and very fantastic race to the win for Ninchin, who just was completely unrivaled, as we saw tonight. Oh well, total lap time by Mini Stiggy. Nicodemus, although he had an early fight with RCB, again a superior victory in GTE, with Duke Adam taking 2nd and Matthias taking 3rd. Right, join us for race 2 on tomorrow night, Sunday, and we will see you then.